Hello everyone, Jonathan here from TNT Games LLC, and in this video, we're going to be using Godot 4.3 to create a custom Point2D tool script. This will allow us to change the brightness, enable shadows, and create a color gradient so we can adjust the center and the outside edge color and sharpness, as well as change the shape from a circle to a square. We'll also create a scene similar to this using color rect 2D and occluders, so our lights can actually cast shadows properly. And now that we have a new Godot 4.3 project open, I'm going to go to Project, Project Settings. We're going to enable Advanced Settings, go down to Window, and change the stretch mode from Disabled to Viewport. And I'm going to leave Aspect as Keep, and then we're going to close that. I'm going to use a user interface for our scene root. Change this to main. And then I'm going to go to scene, save scene as. I'm going to create a new folder. Change this one to scenes. And inside here, we'll just save. Then we're going to add a node. This is going to be a color rect. This is going to be our background, and I'm just going to size it. This is where our shadows will be projected. I'm going to change the color down to something dark so it's not blinding you. And we'll just call this one background. I'm going to add another node. This is going to be a camera 2D. Move that down so that it's vaguely in the middle. I'm going to add another node, and this one is going to be a canvas modulate. This will allow us to change the color of everything as long as it's on the same view layer. And then we'll add a layer. This is going to be a canvas layer. And this is going to be where we put our scene objects. And I'm going to make sure that follow viewport is enabled. And what this is going to do is allow us to change where our lighting will actually affect. I'm going to leave that on layer 1. Inside here, we're going to add a node 2D. And this is going to be lights. And I'm going to right click. And I'm going to duplicate. And change this to blocks. And we're going to create our block. We're going to add, and this is going to be a color rect. And I'm going to right click on the color rect and add child node and add an occluder. This will allow us to add shadows to this. First off, the color rect, we're going to change to block 01. Then we're going to change the layout, the minimum size to 64 pixels by 64. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to click on the Light Occluder 2D. We're going to click on the Add and make sure that we are in the Select mode and not the Move mode. And I'm going to left click. It's going to say there's no polygons. As you can see, the occluder is empty. And we're just going to click Create and left click at the top left and top right, bottom left, and finally top left. And what I like to do is, since this darkens the object, I'm going to go into Visibility and click Show Behind Parent on the Light Occluder. And I'm just going to copy and paste these blocks around. And I'm going to hold Command D, although it's Control D on Windows to duplicate. And that'll give us some blocks in the scene to play around with. Now we're going to create our first point light. This is going to be the manual method. I'm going to look for light and point light 2D. And as you'll notice, the point light 2D has no visibility yet. That's because there's no texture. So what I'm going to do is click this little arrow, go down to New Gradient Texture 2D. Now we have somewhat of a light. You can adjust the texture size and move it around. There's no shadows right now. That's because you have to go down to shadow and enabled. And now we have shadows. But this isn't exactly a point light, so let's go into our texture. We're going to change the width here to 256 and the height to 256. We're also going to change the fill from linear to radial. I'm also going to change the texture size back down a bit. And this also doesn't look like a circle. So what we need to do is adjust our fill and the gradient and change this to 0.5 on the X and 0.5 on the Y. And we want to change the gradient colors so that they're inverted. And now we're starting to get our point light. Everything here can be adjusted in the raw data as well. So if you go into the offsets, you'll notice that when I move this around, it changes. As well, if I left click out here, it just creates another point. And the same thing goes for colors. If I were to change this one's color, something like red, you'll see that the color updated there. And what I want is for this to be somewhere around 0.69. And I want to change the color to alpha 0 and black. That means that this is completely transparent and you won't see it. If I move this one closer to the edge, it gets a sharper appearance. And if I move it further away, it starts blending and blurring into the middle. And I'm going to change this one's color to kind of a darkish and change the saturation to 0. And we'll be using the raw color values when we start setting up our script later. Another thing I can adjust here is the interpolation. Currently it's on linear. You can set it to constant if you want the colors to not blend together. Or you can go with cubic, which is a more blurred, blended look compared to linear. And now that we have our point light set up, you can go down to the energy, and this is where you would adjust the brightness. You can also adjust the blend mode, so it can kind of appear inverted or mixed. Usually we just have add, and this is where the depth is set. So if we didn't want it to work on the background layer, you could set the minimum to 1, so it only works on the block layer, but you don't really see anything happening. I'm also going to duplicate the canvas modulate, because notice that it does not affect the blocks. That's because it's layer dependent, so I'm just going to duplicate the canvas, modulate, and put it over here. And now if I turn it down, the blocks change color. And now if I move the point light around, and nothing happens because we need to set the maximum layers. And this looks good, but maybe we want to see the blocks a bit more. So a fancy trick I like doing is duplicating the light, adding it as a child, and the parent doesn't have the shadow. And then I like to adjust the texture size of the point light so that the shadows are a bit more. Now we can select both of them, set the energy a bit lower, and now if we move the point light around, it gives this nice lighting effect. This is how we create a point light the manual way in Godot 4.3. Next, we're going to add a tool script, so whenever we click the plus button to add a node, you can look for Point2D and it will appear under PointLight 2D. We'll also be able to adjust inspector settings, just like the PointLight 2D has here, but in a more organized and custom layout. We'll also create color presets, interpolation modes, and a number of other things. Now that we have a basic understanding of how point lights can be set up manually, let's add a tool script so that we can create a custom class, set up the inspector window with different categories and an organized layout. This will allow us to set the texture and texture gradient colors, the size, brightness, and even some presets without having to go into the texture and gradients manually. To do this, let's add a script to our PointLight 2D. I'm going to go over to the PointLight and add a script. We'll just change this to Point2D. And I don't want to put it in scenes. Instead, I want to put it into a new folder. I'm going to call this classes and Point2D and create. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the code comments. And we don't need the process function. I'm going to give this a custom class name. This will be Point2D. And at the top, I'm going to make this a tool script. That means this script will run in the editor. Now there are a number of variables and functions that we're going to add to this, but first I would like to show you how to start off small, and then we'll work off of that and we'll reorganize later. To do this, first off, we're going to change the brightness of our point light. This is going to be an export range. And the range is going to be between 0 and 16. And it's going to be around a 0.01 step. This one is going to be brightness. And I mean, this as it is, you can adjust this, but nothing's going to run. So we're going to add a set and variable or value, and we're going to set our brightness to equal the value that is being set in the inspector here. And I'm also going to add a get function, which will return the brightness. And again, this won't do anything except change the brightness value. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the energy of our point light. And if I go back to the 2D view, select our point light, and change the value, nothing will happen. That is because we just created the script, and the tool tag will not initialize until you restart the project or the scene. I'm just going to go up to project and reload current project. Now if I go to 2D, you will see that the brightness is changing. I'm going to hide the other point light for now. So 0, it's not emitting anything, and 16, it's very bright. And that's the basics of how an export variable works and can be added, and how it can change a value that's on a node. The next thing we're going to do is, the inspector is fine, but let's add a custom category. So we'll add an export category, and this is a string, and this will be lighting. Now if I save, and then I click off and click back on, we have a category of lighting with brightness. Now that we have the ability to change the brightness, let's just enable or disable the light by creating another export variable. This one will be export var enable light, and this will be a Boolean variable. And also you can set a default here to true, and then again we're going to do set value, and this will be enable light equals value, and we'll do get return enable light. And for this to work, we have to change the enabled value. So enabled equals val. And go back to the 2D scene, click off, click back on. You can enable or disable the light and change its brightness. Next variable we're going to add is going to enable shadows. Let's go down here. This one's going to be basically what we did up above. Export var enable shadows. And it will be a bool. And it will equal false by default. And we'll do set value and enable shadows equals val and get return enable shadows. And it'll be shadow enabled. So shadow enabled equals val. And for us to see that, you go to 2D, click off the node, click back on. That regenerates the export variables. And if we enable shadows, there we go. Next, we're going to create a texture and a gradient color. So for that, we're going to create a new variable. This one will be var gradient, and it will be a new gradient. We're only going to define that this variable is a gradient. We're not going to set it up as a gradient.new. We'll do that later on down the code. Next, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, add a func update all, and it won't return anything, so it's void. And in the ready, we're going to check if engine.is editor hint update all. And what that does is when this light is loaded, it will check if it's running in the engine, then it will run this function. That will hopefully reduce any sort of performance issues, if there are any, whenever loading the full game later. Next, we're going to check if texture, which that's basically checking to see if this texture exists. Then we're going to run this code. We'll run texture equals texture.duplicate and true. And what that's doing is setting the texture to texture. And so it's setting itself to itself, but then it's basically making unique. It's duplicating what values it has and anything nested inside it. I'm just going to make that one line. And else, if this texture doesn't exist, I'm going to do texture equals gradient texture 2D dot new. Next, we're going to check if not gradient. So if the gradient doesn't exist, we're going to set the gradient to a gradient dot new, and texture dot gradient equals gradient dot new. That's just in case it doesn't have it. Also, I want to set the texture width and height. So we'll just do texture dot width equals 256 and texture dot height equals 256. It's 64 by 64 pixels by default. Now that we have our texture and our gradient created, we want to get the gradient's raw data for offsets and colors. If you have a specific offset or a color you want, then you can just copy the values from here, and again the colors, and you just select the color, go into raw, and whatever these values are, we're going to copy and paste them over here. I'm just going to go over here, and we're going to set the gradient dot offsets equals, and this is going to be an array. I like to have 0 and 0.5 and 0.7. And I'll show you what those are here in a moment. We're also going to set the gradient colors equals an array of color, and we're going to go with 0.78, 0.78, and 0.78, and then this is going to be the alpha, 0.65. Now I'm going to duplicate this down, and then we're going to set 1.8, so 0.18, 0.18, 0.18, and 0.38. And for this last one, we're just going to have zeros, so black, and fully transparent. Next, we're going to need to set the texture.gradient equals gradient. Also, we're going to set our shadows enabled equals enable shadows. And we're going to set our energy to brightness. And I'm also going to add this if engine.isEditorHint. We're going to do notify property list changed. And I'm going to make that one line. Now, if we go to the 2D view, and I'm just going to hide that for now, I'm going to left click on lights, I'm going to click on add, and look for Point2D, and then click on create. And if we move this around, the brightness is 0. We're probably going to want to change that later. Also, we need to set the range so that it affects the blocks. And if we click on enable shadows, it casts shadows. Next, we're going to want to change the shape from a linear gradient to a circle or a square. So let's go back to our script and scroll up to the top. We're going to add an enum, and this one is going to be shape. We're going to start with circle, and square, and linear. Next, let's create another export category. So export category, and just call this one shape. Now we're going to add an export var shape, and it's going to be a type of the shape enum, and it's also going to equal shape.circle by default. And we're going to add set value shape equals val. Then we'll add the update all function and add get return shape. And if you hold command, if you're on Mac, or if you hold control and hover over update all and left click, it will jump down to that function. We're going to add a new function, and I'm just going to put it down here. It will be func change shape. And we're going to check if texture. We're going to match shape. And we're going to check if shape dot circle and texture dot fill. And if we click on our point light 2D, go into texture, go into fill, and we're going to swap between these different values. You have linear, radial, and square. What we want is radial. So texture fill equals gradient texture 2D dot fill radial. And we're also going to set the texture dot fill from dot x equals 0.5 and dot y equals 0.5. This is so our circle point gradient will start at the center of our circle. And we're also going to set the texture dot fill to dot x equals 1 and y will equal 0. And we can condense these down as well. So if we wanted, we could do texture.fill from equals vector 2 and 0.5, 0.5, and we can copy that down. Fill 2, one is going to be 1 and 0. That does the exact same thing, but it looks a bit better. And we're going to copy this, and paste it down, and paste it down again. This time we're going to have square and linear. And I find for the linear, 2 to 0 seems to work. And we want that to start at 0 and 0. For the square, it's the same thing, except we also want the fill radial to be square. Also, this needs to be linear. And now that we have our change shape function, we're going to copy that, and then we're going to paste it down here. And if we save, and go back to 2D, click off and click back on, you'll notice that the shape doesn't exist yet, but if we change it to circle, square, and linear, we now have a shape selection. Let's scroll back up to our export variables, and above the shape category, let's create another category. This one will be export category, and this is going to be colors. We're going to export var point color, and it's going to equal color, and we'll just start off with color dot white. Next, we're going to set value point color equals val, and we're going to use the update all function, and we're going to get return point color. If I click off and back on to the point, we now have a color selection. Next, let's just copy this export variable, and we'll paste it down here, and instead this is going to be edge color. And that, and replace that. Instead, this is going to be a color of 0, 0, 0, so black, and then the alpha is going to be 0.39. And in theory, this should have worked, but the update all function kind of stops the editor from refreshing. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the bottom here, and we're going to create a new function. This is going to be func color changed. And it doesn't return anything. We're going to check if texture and gradient and texture dot gradient. Let's use our gradient variable and dot set color. This is an index, which we're going to get the first value in the gradient, and then we're going to set the color to point color. I'm going to duplicate this down. We're going to set the second color in our gradient to edge color. Then let's copy the color changed function, scroll up to our update all function, and just above the change shape, we're going to put the color changed. We're also going to scroll up to our colors, and instead of update all for point color and edge color, it's going to be color changed. And if we save that, and we click off and click back onto the point, we can change our point colors. It's better to see in the 2D view. But as you can see, we have the point center color, and we have the edge color. And let me show you that circle view. Next, we're going to adjust the fade center and the fade edge of our gradient. If you go back to our gradient and you adjust these values, it changes how much it blends between the colors. Let's go to our script, go down to shape, then we'll add export range. This will be between 0 and 0.69. Remember, we're trying to keep the colors in front of this last value in our gradient. Var fade center equals float, and then we're going to set val, and then fade center equals val, and get return fade center. Also, I think I'm going to add a step value of 0, 1. Then the next step, we're going to set the offsets. We're going to check if gradient. Then we're going to get gradient.set offset. And again, we need the index. And then we can put in val. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And this will be fade edge. And we'll copy that and replace fade center and change the index to 1. And now if I scroll up and click off, click back on, we have fade center and fade edge. And if I adjust the values, they change their position. Now there is one issue with this. If the fade center goes past the fade edge, we start getting this color mix-up. It doesn't understand what to do. And then sometimes we can end up with the colors swapping. So in order to fix that, we're going to add an if check right here in fade center. If fade edge and fade center is greater than fade edge equals value plus 0.01. So we're adding a little bit of an offset to keep it above. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it into the fade edge as well. Instead, this one is going to be fade center, and fade edge is less than fade center. Fade center equals val minus 0.01. Now, in order to reset this value, I'm going to change the color, and that will reset the gradient colors. And if I change this, you'll notice that it always keeps the other slider just a little bit in front or behind. And now we have the ability to fade the edge or sharpen it. Also, we need to add those values to our script and the color changed. So let's just copy that and scroll all the way down to color changed. And we'll set the index to 0 and fade center. Copy that down, index of 1 and fade edge. There are a lot of other variables that we can add and change, but I think for this tutorial, I'm going to cut it a little bit short. The last thing we're going to add is a reset variable. And for that, we're going to scroll up to the top. I'm going to create an export category, and this will be tools. Export var reset, and this will be a Boolean variable. And we're going to type in set val. This is going to be reset equals val. We'll be adding a function down below called reset all. And it's going to throw an error because it doesn't exist yet. And then we're going to set reset to equal false. And then add a get return reset. I'm also going to duplicate this. And this is going to be called regenerate. And copy that, reset. And this one is going to be update all. And regenerate. Now let's create this reset all function. Scroll down to the bottom and func reset all. This is going to be a void because it doesn't return anything. The reset all function is going to reset all export variables to their default values. We're going to change enable light equals true and enabled equals true. Enable shadows equals false, and shadow enabled equals false, and brightness equals 4.0. Point color equals color dot white. Edge color equals color 0, 0, 0 and 0.39. Fade center equals 0.0, and fade edge equals 0.69. Shape equals shape.circle. And finally, if engine.isEditorHint notify property list changed. And now, if we click off, click back on, and we'll just uncheck these and set the values. And change that to square and fade center. Now if I click reset, it will reset the values to 0 and .69, colors to white, brightness to 4, enable shadows off, and enable light. We also have a regenerate function, which just runs the update all function. I know there are still a lot of functions and variables we can add, but I feel like this tutorial is getting a little long and you have the basic understanding of how you could do it yourself. If you want to look through my add-on, Point2D, it is on the asset library. It has a bunch of extra stuff that you could include in your own script. And just download, and it will install. And then you go up to Project, Project Settings, go into Plugins, and enable Point2D. Then you go to Light, then you go to Add, type in Point, and there's Point2D. Click on Create, and it sets up everything for you with Enable Shadows. It even has a minimum and maximum layer. You have the light distance, fade center, fade edge. You can change the colors. Or you can even set the color preset between cool, day, warm, and hot. There's also an invert color, which can give you some fun effects as well. You can change the brightness. You can set the interpolation to constant, linear, or cubic. And of course enable and disable the light. And I usually like to duplicate the light and make it a child, enable shadows, select both the lights, change the brightness to something lower, and maybe change the distance of the shadows to be a little bit more, and it gives a pretty fun little lighting effect. And that wraps up this video. Hope this helps you on your game dev journey. I'm Jonathan from TNT Games. Have a good day.